Happy New Year everyone, and welcome to the Ideal series, where today I'm talking about what I want in my ideal version of Cyberpunk 2077. I've had the idea to do this series and apply it to Cyberpunk for quite some time, and I've thought to myself, Jesus, the game's coming out in April, which is still absolutely crazy to comprehend that it's so close, so I better get the hell on this series before all this stuff gets confirmed anyway. Now today I want to talk about points of interest on the map, specifically in the ideal Cyberpunk 2077, I want there to be meaningful points of interest and locations on the map. Now, this is something any player would naturally want out of any open world game, because obviously the key distinction between an open world game and a linear game is the fact that it's an open environment. So the quality of an open world not only depends on, of course, its design, its aesthetic, and other different things like that, it also obviously, and probably primarily, depends on the quality of the points of interest that the player is engaging in, and from the perspective of side quests and different things like that around the world, I have absolutely no doubt that CD Projekt Red will be able to deliver a high standard of that, because we know obviously from a little game, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called The Witcher 3, but in that game they proved that they can absolutely develop amazing side quests in their open world games and their RPGs, so we have no reason to doubt CD Projekt at this point in time in that regard. But I think points of interest on a map are more interesting to discuss, because I think that there's more of a chance, I'm not saying there's a high chance, but there's more of a chance that this aspect of the game doesn't deliver as we want. Now, specifically what I'm talking about is, I guess, what would be comparable to in The Witcher 3, the question marks that are all over the map. I'm not talking about the side quests like I said, I'm talking about the question marks that are around the map. Like in The Witcher 3, there's the bandit camps, there's the monster nests and things like that. The places of power as well, I forgot to mention. Now, the points of interest in The Witcher 3 are certainly formulaic, because there's only, a select number of them. I think there's like 4 or 5 different types, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but there's not a whole lot of different variation in the points of interest you'll come across. You know, when you see a question mark on the map, it's going to be one of 5 different things that you've already run into many times before. So in that sense, I guess it could be a fair wish or a fair request to want Cyberpunk 2077's open world areas to be more varied and to not be so tired and repetitive in the same way that The Witcher 3's were. But to be honest, for me personally, I think The Witcher 3's points of interest are excellent. Sure, they're repetitive in their nature and they're formulaic, like I said, but I've always found them engaging. I found them always, or at least predominantly, worthy of my time. When there's a hidden area with a chest, often that chest had decent gear that I wanted, or at least was valuable for me to sell. There was very rarely any location that had something that just wasn't worth it, Maybe the ones that just give you a bit of XP, maybe they kind of sucked because the amount of XP they gave you was abysmal. But other than that, I found that the player was, for the most part, adequately rewarded for engaging in those side activities in the game. And it was that, along with the fact that the open world design was just so incredible, the atmosphere was wonderful, I was so immersed in the world due to the music and everything to do with the world building in that game. All of those factors contributed to me wanting to go and explore every single question mark, which is something I just normally don't care about in open world games. I've played through the recent Assassin's Creed games and I've personally never really given a shit about going to all the locations in those games, because for the most part, they feel very uninspired compared to The Witcher 3's sense of atmosphere, like I mentioned. So that's why I love The Witcher 3's points of interest, and for me that's the standard that I'm applying to Cyberpunk 2077 when I think about what I want from that open world. Obviously, I'm not talking about the exact same shit. I don't want places of power in Cyberpunk, obviously. But I guess what I am saying is that across the Cyberpunk map, with the hopefully really interesting story, fantastic characters, and side quests, I want those points of interest, those question mark areas in Cyberpunk, to give me a very similar experience I had with The Witcher, where even if they are formulaic, which it would be awesome if they're not, but I'm totally fine with them being so, if I'm adequately rewarded for exploring them, if they're fun to explore, if the world encourages me and the gameplay encourages me to explore them, that's really all I want, and I'm totally down for some repetition like we've seen with CD Projekt before. if I can get that. I just want for these activities to be something I want to engage in. But it's a point I wanted to discuss specifically because I feel like it's one that's underappreciated, one that isn't talked about by a lot of the fandom because it isn't overly obvious, I think. The writing and the RPG choices consequence stuff and the leveling system, all that stuff we get, that CD Projekt Red can do this stuff great, you know. But I think the points of interest are something that are overlooked in a lot of open world games, especially since I think that the fact that Cyberpunk's world is going to be so different to The Witcher 3, obviously aesthetically and in terms of its style and what it's going for, with it being a sci-fi setting naturally, compared to medieval and fantasy. But apart from just the clear change in the setting and the genre in that sense, and the fact of course that it's first-person gameplay, that's going to definitely change the way we engage with the world as well. There are even more interesting possibilities aside from just those differences in regards to the density of the open world, because from what we've seen of Night City so far in the gameplay demos and trailers, it looks to be incredibly dense. I do not expect at all for Cyberpunk 2077's open world to be nearly as big as The Witcher 3 in terms of pure land mass and width. I don't expect that it would take me nearly as long to cross the map in Cyberpunk 2077. However, I do think it's going to be a step up from The Witcher 3 in a huge way, and a huge step up for the genre of open world games in general in terms of how vertical it's going to be. I think that there's going to be a lot more of the content and the areas of interest being packed in tightly within the city environment. And I think that, like I said, along with the first person gameplay, the fact that a lot of the map is going to be vertical based within skyscrapers and large buildings and in packed suburban environments and areas, I think that stuff is going to really bring an interesting flair to the points of interest, so hopefully them being even more meaningful and diverse than what we're used to in open world games. I think it's obvious that we're going to get the natural, you know, bandit hideout areas where we'll probably infiltrate different like gang hideouts and shoot up the joint. Obviously that sounds pretty self-explanatory for any open world game, but I think it would also be cool if there were other more interesting areas where we could try and hack into or sneak into huge large corporate towers and get in there and try and hack into their computer system to get skill points, that kind of thing, replacing maybe the place of power system in The Witcher 3, which also gave you skill points. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, there are a lot of interesting ideas like that that could really make the game stand out in that sense. So anyway, I wanted to talk about these points of interest, like I said, because I think CD Projekt Red has set a really high bar. I really think they're going to be able to meet it, and I think it's a part of games that people don't often discuss when it comes to open world titles. Not to mention, we actually haven't really seen a lot of it in the gameplay trailers at all. We've only gotten glimpses into how different narratives and quests will progress as opposed to actual general open world exploration, so it's something we haven't seen a lot of, so it's more fun to talk about. Alright, leave your thoughts on this video in the comments down below. Tell me how excited you are for Cyberpunk 2077 coming real soon now. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video. This has been SirCazz, farewell.